On this episode of Eager to Know, we talk about creativity for your own growth versus creativity for getting the validation of others.
I discovered later on in my life that it was also kind of a performance. Rather than sort of explore my own creative visions, I think I was often fulfilling other people's idea of what they wanted me to do.
How learning to paint can change the way you view the world. You learn about relationships on your canvas and colors. You start to see that in the world, not visually, like relationships with people. It's very strange. And finding creativity in cooking.
And eventually I just decided I was going to try, cooking rather than painting. And so I gave up my painting practice and committed myself to the kitchen.
On today's episode, we talk to Timothy Allen, who is the curator of Next Stage Arts in Putney, Vermont, where I am currently having an art show, and I am doing an artist talk on Thursday, May 29th, 2025, and it was great getting to know Tim better and talk about all sorts of topics related to creativity, art, and cooking. Hey everyone, I am here with Timothy Allen, who is the curator and involved in all sorts of gallery activities at Next Stage Arts in Putney, Vermont, where I have an upcoming show. And he is also a personal chef. So there's a lot of things that I am very curious to talk to him about. Timothy, welcome to Eager to Know.
Thanks, Ricky. Glad to be here.
Now, I want to know how you got involved in art, because I think you went to school for illustration. Is that correct?
I kind of got into art just by being born, I think. I always liked drawing and painting when I was young. And when I was about 6, my parents enrolled me in art classes because whenever I drew something, they said it looked like what it was supposed to be. So I guess that was what made an artist.
So do you mean like art classics outside of
school? Yeah.
Wow,
like special art
that's
classes.
Really.
Yeah.
But that must have been some pretty good drawings that you were doing.
It was. I spent a lot of time drawing and painting when I was young. So when I got sort of fast forward to when I went to college, I painted and drew all through grade school and high school and had a real identification as an artist.
Oh, hold on. I want to hear about it being a kid though, because were you not out playing with the kids and doing tag and all that stuff, or were you just spending all of your time mostly drawing?
No, I was out playing around. I played sports and I think I was pretty well rounded. But, when I was at home, I liked to be kind of off on myself, drawing and painting, and I had my room plastered with pictures from Ranger Rick and other magazines because I liked the pictures.
I remember.
So I was very visually attuned.
Yeah.
And really liked copying pictures and just really spent a lot of time doing that.
Wonderful.
Yeah.
And where was the place that you did your drawing?
The dining room table. Most, I think. Okay. Yeah.
And did you have other family members all running around doing things and you were just ignoring them and you were focused on your drawing?
Yeah. I'm the middle of 5 kids, so it kind of fits that I was involved in stuff with the family too, but I was really kind of a loner in a way.
Yeah.
And I liked having activity around me, and I still do, but I like doing my own thing in the midst of it.
When you do art now or as you got older, did you find that it was somewhat of an escape from, like, you kind of go into your own little world?
Yes. Yeah, it was a bit of an escape. I discovered later on in my life that it was also kind of a performance. And that created some tension around, how I wanted to spend time, painting and drawing.
What do you mean by it was a performance?
Well, my mom would say, "Oh, that's a really pretty picture. Why don't you do a card for a grandma?" Or, it was like, people wanting to do things for me because I was good at it. So, and of course I wanted the attention. And so it's like, yeah, I'll do that if I'm going to get this attention. And so I think rather than sort of explore my own creative visions, I think I was often fulfilling other people's idea of what they wanted me to do.
Because you would get more attention and more praise for that.
Yeah. Paint a pretty picture.
Right.
Yeah.
Interesting.
Yeah.
So then as you had visions for yourself being an adult in the world, you envisioned yourself doing something in creativity and art?
Yeah. I definitely saw myself doing something artistic, and for a while it was as an architect. And I used to spend a lot of time drawing out plans for my fantasy house.
Yeah.
Which had it was very big and had a lot of, had like, I don't know, just a lot of space in it, which was really impractical. I didn't know anything about architecture.
Did it have a lot of rooms, or did it just have?
Yeah, a lot of rooms and things like, had a big room with a pool table, because we had a pool table growing up, and so I wanted a pool table, and a swimming pool because we also had a swimming pool growing up, and so that kind of thing. I wanted to kind of enlarge what I grew up with and what I enjoyed.
I'm curious. So it had you envisioned a lot of features of things.
Yes.
Now,
yes.
did you?
I was very detail oriented.
Did you have a sense of size and proportion, or was it just about you needed these features? And how? And
yeah, I didn't have any really real sense of how houses were built. So I was just sort of connecting, creating a room and connecting another room to another room with no idea like how the roof was going to go on, or, where the windows were going to be and that sort of thing. It was basically a bird's eye view of what a house was going to look like.
Was it a single floor?
I think it usually was.
Okay.
Because I grew up in Florida where we had a single floor house and most houses were like that.
So it's interesting. When I was a kid, we did something in my neighborhood was very creative. And luckily, we didn't have iPads, and we really didn't, even though they were available, we really didn't have video games. And one of the things that we used to do in the fall is we would rake up all of the leaves and make streets with the leaves. The grass would be the street, and the piles of leaves on the side would be the streets, but we would create homes. And so all the homes would have like different rooms, and so I didn't have a specific vision of what my home would be, but that was one of the only times, even though I was creative in many ways, where I would actually be creating something that was a home, and all the rooms would be in, down to the closets and the bathrooms, and it was really, really fun.
And you were doing that with other kids?
Yeah, I did it with the 5 kids that I grew up with. Well,
wow.
four. There was 5 of us.
So it was collaborative.
Yeah, so they would each do their own home, and then we would name all the streets. And it was really, at the time I didn't think anything of it, but looking back on it, I'm like, we were like super in it. We were 100% committed to this, and we really enjoyed it. So.
Fun.
Yeah, it is really fun.
Yeah.
And so when you got to college, you went to college, and where did you go?
I went to Rhode Island School of Design in Providence.
Okay.
And I went there thinking, because I was really good at fine detail drawing at that point, which I kind of developed in high school. And so I went there thinking that having this idea that I would be a medical illustrator. That was like, okay, that's a cool thing.
That's pretty specific.
Which is very specific and but once I got there.
I love that you were that specific. That's great.
Yeah. But once I got to college, I was taking classes in all different kinds of things. And one thing I really enjoyed was 3D design. 3-dimensional design. So that got me interested in, broadening beyond just illustration.
Right.
And so I decided to enroll in the industrial design program there.
So tell me about industrial design. That means, tell
yeah,
people.
Well, people kind of say if you shake the earth, everything that falls off is designed by industrial designers. So everything except buildings and sort of, what else is? Clothing and buildings. Everything else is designed by industrial designers. Products, packaging.
So like this,
the microphone.
The microphone.
Yeah, the headphones you're wearing. Everything is, It's a pretty broad field. Yeah.
So you started off as a medical illustrator. You decided that you wanted to get into 3D, and that led to industrial design. And so did you end up getting a degree in industrial design?
No, I ended up going 3 years and then stopping because for a lot of different reasons. But mostly I just wasn't. I realized now that structured learning is really not the way I like to learn. I like to learn on my own.
Interesting.
And I was distracted by a bunch of sort of lifestyle things, and so decided college really wasn't the best fit for me, so I stopped.
Do you feel that you are do you feel comfortable with your ability to learn, but just as long as it's done in a way that is...
Yeah, I feel like I guess I would describe myself as a self-learner, that I like to learn on my own and to explore by exploring rather than being in a classroom and learning, something from someone up there teaching me. I mean, I feel like I have a lot of teachers in the world, but they're not classroom teachers.
It's very interesting. One of the past guests I had on Eager to Know was he worked at Vermont Academy, Vermont Academy, that's right, but he works at Mount Snow. And he is all about creating programs that optimize the way different kids learn, because kids learn in different ways. And so we talked a lot about that. It was really interesting. I've always been kind of the tradition. I think I respond, as long as I can pay attention, I respond to a traditional learning, the way things are structured in our education system. Like, it pretty much works for me.
Yeah.
As long as I can pay attention and I'm not being disruptive in class. But if I am paying attention, it totally works. But all right, so you got out and then and then
I just kind of floundered for a few years, and I moved to the Boston area.
Flounder, okay.
Yeah.
Interesting.
I wasn't really sure what I wanted to do.
That sounds like a whole nother podcast episode.
Oh yeah, exactly. I felt like I never, like, my life up until then had been very much structured, and like, here's what I'm going to do, and here's what I'm going to do next, and here's what I'm going to do next. And what I've learned since then is I really need a lot of freedom, and I wasn't getting the freedom I wanted in that up until then. So finally, I wasn't in college. I didn't have like this future ahead of myself imagined, so I could do anything. And I pretty much, just explored a lot of different things. I ended up traveling in Europe for a while, then going to massage school, during which I learned an incredible amount about myself and, working with other people and, the human body. And then I got into the early Pilates craze in the early 90s, before anybody knew what it was, and taught Pilates and taught exercise to seniors. And so I was very much into this sort of body oriented, and I wasn't doing any real artwork then, or painting or drawing. I was sort of, I think I would say that I was sort of living a creative life, because everything I did, I brought some kind of creativity to, just like how I decorated my bedroom, or, exploring doing cut glass, things, just little projects that I did. So I did that I was in the Boston area for 15 years. And then when my husband and I moved to Vermont in 2001, I started painting again. I had sort of started getting an interest in doing that, and found that I had the time and space where we lived.
So you hadn't done any visual arts in that period?
Very little.
Between the end of school.
Yeah.
And I'm curious,
right.
Do you feel that you were satisfied with the amount of creative outlets that you had based on those other things that you described? Or did you feel that you were being, held back and not being your full creative self?
Yeah, I think I was probably being a little held back, because I really enjoyed talking with people about it. And I think, I always loved looking at art, talking with people about art. And I think that's, coming to where I am now as more of a curator. I think that's a better role for me, actually, than an artist in terms of my fit.
So let's talk about that. You are the curator at Next Stage Arts, which is an art center in beautiful Putney, Vermont. And the building is beautiful. The space is beautiful. The space has tons of events and performances. There's a gigantic stage, a theater.
Yeah.
There is a big kitchen downstairs.
There's a commercial kitchen.
In a big
community space down there.
It's really incredible. But outside, there's also a gallery space. Now, you were involved in making that into a gallery space. Is that accurate?
Yeah, I was approached by when they were rehabbing that building to become Next Stage. It was an old church, and one of the people involved knew that I did curating and art hanging at the Brattleboro Museum, and so they asked if I'd be interested in turning this space upstairs, sort of at the entrance to the theater, into a gallery space, which would give it some purpose other than just a waiting area for people before they went in. So I did that. I worked with a contractor to bring the right lighting in. I chose the wall color.
The hanging system.
There's a hanging system because we really can't put. We created a hanging system because the walls are old and they would just, eventually get in really bad shape if we put a lot of hardware in them. So that works really well. Yeah, it's been a really fun project. I really enjoyed creating the gallery, and we have 4 shows a year, or 4 shows a year. I'm sort of the de facto curator because no one really on our committee really knows how to do that. So I do pretty much the curating and hanging of the artwork.
Obviously, that's interesting work. Do you feel that makes you connected with your creative self, or is it not so much that part of you?
Yeah, it definitely taps into a creative interest, and I think there's also a visual thing. I think I'm a little obsessed visually with how things are arranged.
Okay.
Like if I go into a room, I'm always sort of looking at how it could be arranged in a more comfortable way.
Well, we can have a discussion about this room here.
Okay.
Because this room is incredible and it's a disaster. But
yeah.
It's really, yeah.
Okay. Yeah, I think it is a real creative pursuit.
Okay.
And really, kind of aligns with my interest in having things visually be a certain way. Also, can be a little obsessive and like a perfectionist. So that's really good for someone who's hanging art in a museum or a gallery.
Okay. All right. And so you had done this first at the Brattleboro Museum in Brattleboro.
Yeah,
Vermont.
I started.
Are you still doing that?
Yeah, I started hanging artwork at the Brattleboro Museum in 2004. The job is called a preparator, which means I will go in and take down artwork that's hanging, repair the walls, and then talk with the artists and curator about what's going up next, and do the installations and make sure everything looks good. There's often some, problem solving involved with like hanging sculptures or, wall pieces that are not easy to figure out how to get on the walls. Artists are really good at creating things and not always very good at knowing how they're going to show them. So that's something that I'm tasked with figuring out, is how I'm going to show their artwork to its best.
I want to go back to you as a kid and a youngster, because it sounds like as an adult, as we all do, we have a better understanding of ourselves. And looking back at when you were a youngster, what would you either say to that younger person, or what do you think about how that person was viewing themselves in the world? Was that person feeling frustrated, and now you realize, oh, that's why I was frustrated?
I think I understand now why that young me needed so much attention or accolades or praise. I felt really insecure, even though, I was a pretty well-adjusted kid in many ways. But looking back on it, when I started painting again, when we moved to Vermont, I realized that I was still performing, and painting. So as a way of, I had a therapist once tell me, well, why don't you try painting something ugly? And that was a really good directive, because I went in the studio and just started fooling around and taking, what it allowed me to do is to take risks. I wasn't really intentionally trying to paint something ugly, but some things turned out that I didn't like, and that was kind of the risk, painting something that someone else might not like.
Is it necessarily a negative or not so great thing to be performing?
I think that for me, performing can mean that I'm not really aligned with what I want. I'm more in tune with what the audience wants. And so I think that if I can do both, if I can create something that's mine and that I'm really proud of and that the audience also likes, but I think I was too much on the side of I'm not really going to explore what I want to do. I'm just going to want to paint what I know people will like. Does that make sense? Yeah.
And if you are creating work that you don't get a response from people, but you love it, is that enough?
Yes. Now it is.
But it wasn't before.
It wasn't before. No.
Interesting.
But I was also creating. I was painting things like landscapes, and I was doing representational painting, which means, landscapes or people or whatever that you could tell if it didn't look like it was supposed to, what it was supposed to be. And so that was there was sort of more of a subjectivity to that. And when I really started painting what I wanted, or using art as a practice, and kind of just stepping into the studio and starting to paint without any idea what I was going to do. I was doing non-representational painting at that point, abstract painting. And that was much more interesting to me. And also much more confrontational or kind of frustrating. Like sometimes I wouldn't know what to do next. And when I was painting trees or, landscapes, I always knew what I would do next, because I knew what the end point was going to be.
Absolutely.
So it was so, and I've done abstract paintings that people haven't responded to, but that I really liked, and I partly liked them because I really loved the process of creating it. It was really fun, and I felt energized, and it's not really all about the finished product for me. It's partly about the process, how I got there, and that's very different from how I did art when I was young.
Yeah.
I didn't have that nuance to it.
So, super interesting. So a couple things. I think that the idea of doing something for yourself on one side of the spectrum and then doing things for other people, I feel it's important, just personally, for me, to do a little bit of both. Because I do think it's important to do things that are going to connect with people.
Yes.
And especially as it relates to, so for me, I can relate this to me speaking, because I can be very satisfied talking and saying things and expressing myself where people don't know what the heck I'm talking about. And I'm completely disconnected, and I don't even realize it. And so that's one, and I am completely thrilled with what is coming out of my mouth and in my brain. And then on the other side, the other extreme is you can be just saying what people want. And I think the balance, the model for me, I see, is finding something where it's a balance between I like what I'm saying, and but it's also I am still staying connected with people.
Yes.
So I can definitely see that with art, and I think in general my art is I'm always usually considering the viewer. I'm not considering everyone. I'm usually thinking about one person that's going to like it. Now, the abstract stuff, I would agree with you. That is a much more, not that I have a lot of experience with that, but that's definitely something where you're kind of going inside your head and you're exploring ideas.
Yes.
And you're exploring visual relationships, and I think it can be a fun thing. I mean, I really haven't done enough of it, but I don't think, for me, that was when I did my abstract work, it definitely wasn't something where I could think, how am I going to create something that people are going to like?
Yeah.
It would never work.
Yeah.
Now, maybe if I did it for 10 years and I had more data where I could see what people responded to, and I would be, have a better understanding, but as it stands now, it's...
Did you find that, have you found that doing abstract painting you connect more with yourself? Is there an aspect of that?
I'm not really sure. Mm-hmm. I'm not really sure. I think I tried. I think I would have to do more. I think with anything, you just have to do more of it to figure out how you relate to it. Mm-hmm. And I did a show, but it was only 8 paintings. I probably didn't do that much more than those 8 paintings, but it's really scary for me because it's I'm very much a goal-oriented person, and I always have an end goal in mind. And just doing something like that is really, it's just, you're very untethered, and it's very scary. I mean, even painting in general, just starting, unless I was doing a paint by numbers where I could actually, knew exactly what was happening, there's always an element of risk where you're just putting yourself out there and seeing where it goes. And I'm really not that comfortable with that, at least on the canvas. Maybe in other areas of life I might be, but I'm much better with it. I think, you have to let go in order to paint. You have to, because that's part of painting. You
only have so much control.
You only have so much control. Yeah. And there is a part of you that is coming out on that canvas that is not, it's not about hue, color, composition, the lines. There is something inside of you, the individual artist, that actually just ends up coming out, which is really interesting.
Did you ever do a drawing before you painted? Was that something?
Oh yeah.
Yeah.
Tons. I call it dating. So I will I do a lot of dating with the subject matter to see if I want to spend time with it. And I do a lot of studies, not so much now, but because I'm much more comfortable just jumping in on a bare canvas. But certainly when I was when I was developing my skills, I really had to do a lot of sketches, drawings, studies to be really comfortable with what I was doing before I would want to jump in.
Yeah.
So it made it a little bit more predictable, which is what I was looking for, because I was so, I had no confidence, and I didn't have skill either. I didn't have confidence or skill. So I really had to find a way to solve this problem of getting predictability. And the way that I solved it was with lots of sketches, drawings, color studies, blah, blah, blah. And then I would do a full underpainting. And then that would sort of give me a sense of, predictability. But you can tell in those paintings, like some of the stuff in the show of mine that you just hung.
Yes.
Those were not, well, some of them were, but some of them definitely were not. Like I was just going for it. And the result, I feel really good about the result, but I would not have had that result if I did that 10 years ago. I just wouldn't have, because I didn't have the skill or the confidence or the familiarity with the tools.
Yeah. Yeah. That show of yours, which has about 20 pieces in it. Is that right?
I don't know what.
Something like
I
that.
haven't seen it yet. I gave you a whole bunch of paintings.
Yes.
You hung them, and then you just gave me the few that didn't get hung.
Yeah.
I think I probably gave you 20 paintings. So.
Yeah. So there's probably 15 or 16 on the walls. Well, one thing I want to say about the show is that what you just commented about all the ways that you have come to do what you're doing in painting and with preparatory drawings and things. The show really reflects your versatility with doing things that are, some things are fairly photoreal in a way, a little bit abstracted, but very much, this is a water tower and it's a really beautiful rendition. And then, you have some beautiful, very gestural figure paintings with gouache there, and some sort of more abstracted, almost like color field paintings of figures, the ones on the ice during the winter. So there's I really love the range that you're showing in this show. I think it's really worth taking a look. So I hope you all can get there.
Yeah.
All of you listening now.
I can't wait to see it. And the other thing is I will be doing an artist talk on the Thursday of the opening of Thursday, May 29th.
Yes.
Yeah. So, and what I'm going to be talking about is, it kind of relates to this. Really everything that we've been talking about is everything that I learned about life and myself from my canvas. When I started painting, I thought that I was going to be learning about well, first of all, I didn't know anything about painting, but then I started taking some formal training, and I realized, okay, this is about composition, and it's about line, and it's about hue and saturation and all of that stuff. And so that's what I thought that it was all about. And it is. But I also learned a lot about how your mind develops these things. And I learned about relationships between, you learn about relationships on your canvas and colors. And you start to see that in the world, not visually, but the way, like relationships with people. It's very strange the way the human mind works, because when you're learning one thing, it actually gets applied in other things. So as I was learning about it. Very intense, it's very intense painting, and you're really, all the things are really developing in your brain, and you're making all new connections. And those new connections, the rest of the world gets, you respond differently to the rest of the world from those connections. I don't know if it's really hard to explain, but I just remember spending a lot of time looking at colors and the canvas and having to look at color in a whole new way as a painter. And then I would go outside for a walk and suddenly everything would just look differently because I had been stimulating my brain. It was very odd, but that would happen in other ways too.
Yeah. Yeah. It's kind of a feedback loop. You start to really, you paint and you go out and look, and you paint and go out and look, and coming back in, there's always a different experience happening.
You do something else that is very interesting and inspirational to me. It's kind of like this job that you have that I kind of wish that I had, and you are a personal chef?
Yes, that's right.
Personal chef in Vermont.
I could probably call myself a lot of things, but that's sort of the word I use for the cooking I do.
All right.
Yeah.
Okay, so tell everyone a little bit about what that is. How many clients do you have?
Yeah.
Do you have like a big, giant industrial kitchen with a team of employees that are creating things, or what?
No, I have a fairly small kitchen in my own home that is certified as a what do they call it? I have a home catering license, which is granted by the health department, and I do very small events. One reason I don't call myself a caterer is because I don't like doing things like weddings. I like working on my own, and it's really a creative endeavor for me. So doing small events, I can be really creative, and it's not so much about production as about creating something, beautiful and tasty. And what I really like to do is collect local ingredients and make really good food. And I do small dinner parties for people. I have a small weekly meal delivery where people who want my meals get a cooler with a certain number of servings of a meal every week, and it's pretty low key. I wouldn't say that it's definitely not full time. I like to do a lot of other things. So, and I think one reason why I like to work this way is because I've always liked working on my own and for myself. Not like I would never want to work for a restaurant or own a restaurant, just because I'm not a very good collaborator. I want too much control over my product, and sometimes I'll have somebody help me out, chopping vegetables or helping to serve and clear and clean up. But
you get to create the menu, and you get to go shopping for the ingredient. And we have incredible ingredients up here in Vermont. And then you will consult with your client to determine what the menu is going to be based on what's available. And
that's right. And based on what the dietary needs are. Like if I'm cooking for a group, there's often, as a matter of course, I tend to cook gluten-free because most people these days, there's always someone in a group that's gluten-free. And often someone who's vegetarian, often someone who has a nut allergy or a soy allergy, or, there's often a lot of things to work around. So that's one of the challenges. And I'm really happy if there's a group that has no restrictions, and I can make something like a seafood chowder or lamb shanks or, something like that.
That sounds fantastic.
Yeah. And I just want to say a little bit how I've always liked to cook. Since I was young, I just remember always liking, and I like to eat. I like to eat good food. So that's one reason liking to cook is sort of serves that interest. And I found myself starting about 10 years ago, really feeling kind of isolated in my studio work as a painter. And, I would find myself at lunch going up and spending 3 hours making lunch and then coming back downstairs to paint. And eventually I just decided I was going to try, cooking rather than painting. And so I gave up my painting practice and committed myself to the kitchen. It really feels quite a lot like painting. And the difference for me is that it's less isolating. I'm, in our house, the kitchen's in the middle of the house. So, often when I'm cooking, there's people around. And if I'm cooking at a job, there's people around. And I really like having people around and not being so isolated. And it's also, food is a kind of a community building exercise in a way, or it's a way to, a way to be in community. And I found painting was just kind of, nobody really witnessed me making my paintings. And then I would take them to a gallery or somewhere where they'd be seen, but I wouldn't get people's comments about that because I wasn't there. It just felt really kind of disconnected in a way. And with food, I'm usually there when they're eating it, so I get to hear their feedback, and there's a real sense of appreciation and a much better sense of connection. And it also feels like a creative endeavor. So that kind of fits for me.
That all makes perfect sense.
And I love the shopping. I love going out and getting just the right ingredients, having relationships with local farms and producers, and, just getting the right thing, or going out to my own garden to, chop, harvest some chervil or basil or mint or, whatever to put in my food.
This sounds like you're living people's dream.
I have to say I have a very good life.
That sounds fantastic. I would definitely say that envisioning a meal or a dish and then going out and buying ingredients and then coming home and unpacking everything from the grocery store and washing all of the vegetables and the whole, and then the chopping, the whole process is just such a great experience. And it is, I feel that it is somewhat of a creative experience as well.
Yeah. So. Yeah, I love bringing stuff home and just having everything laid out on the counter, ready to process, and really beautiful.
Where did you live before you lived in Vermont?
In the Boston area, mostly in Cambridge.
Okay, so you had access to good food there.
Yeah, I did. And also, for about half the time I lived there, the second half of the time I lived there, I was living in a co-op house in Cambridge, and there were usually about 12 of us. And everyone in the house cooked for the whole group twice a month. That was sort of one of the ways the co-op was structured. And so I got really good practice at cooking for, a group of people, and they really liked my cooking. And
How many people were in the house?
Usually, I think there were 12 bedrooms, and it wasn't always full, but between 10 and 12 people usually.
Yeah, so that is a whole nother level of cooking. I was part of a ski house here in Vermont when I lived in Boston, and it slept 14 people. So there would be the big meal on Saturday night, and there were only certain people that were able to be assigned, because we had assignments, like people would be, Friday night welcome cheese and crackers, and then there would be cleanup and breakfast. But there was only certain people that would be allowed to do Saturday night dinner for 14 gay men. You can imagine how picky everyone would be. And I was lucky that I was one of those people. So there was only like 3 of us. So I would often be making dinner for everyone. And that is a whole nother skill set, making dinner for 14 people. You really have to learn what you're doing. Now, luckily, we did not put up with anything about allergies or gluten or vegetarianism. You got meat and starch and carbs and sugar and everything, and everyone ate it.
Yeah.
We had no special dishes.
Those were the days.
Yeah. So.
Yeah. That's funny.
Well, good. Well, thank you for coming in and chatting with me. Yeah. And I'm glad that you took care of my paintings, and that I have great confidence that you hung everything and that it is going to look the best that it can be. I'm looking forward to seeing it at Next Stage Arts. I'm not sure when this episode will drop, but it is, what is it? It's May 21st right now, and the show is up. It's up. Yeah. It's at Next Stage Art in Putney, Vermont. And then my talk and I guess the official opening reception will be Thursday, May 29th from 6 to 8. And I'm going to be doing an artist talk at 7 o'clock. And the show will be up until August 10th?
Mid-August, yeah, something like that.
I think August 10th. So
Yeah,
it's definitely a varied work, which is why I called it Art Array. It's multiple styles of my work, from abstract-ish stuff to stuff that's a little bit tighter.
it's a beautiful and interesting show. Go see it.
All right. Well, thanks so much for hanging out.
Thanks, Ricky. It's really fun.
My name is Ricky McEachern, and you have been listening to Eager to Know, the podcast. If you haven't already, please go to Apple Podcasts and subscribe, rate, and review this podcast. Join me next week for another Eager to Know podcast.